Welcome to another episode of Healing Wisdom. Join me, Pandora, and my guests as we explore history, cultural traditions, science, spirituality, social justice, and the healing aspects of the arts. Today we speak with Dr. Ed Pias. He's been teaching music in New Mexico for 20 years, including 17 online. He teaches a variety of music appreciation courses as part of the class department at New Mexico Tech. In college, Ed majored in jazz percussion and world music. He holds a Doctor of Musical Arts from the University of Washington in Seattle, a Master of Fine Arts in Music from CalArts, and a Bachelor's of Music from Berklee School of Music. We're going to talk about your time in India and Bangladesh, the healing power of music, your discovery of Native American flute, teaching students music, how animals respond to music, and how we can relate to nature through music. So thank you so much, Dr. Ed Pias, for being with us today.
It is a joy to be here with you, Miss Pandora.
First off, what makes a good music student?
A very good listener. Someone who can listen, someone who is open. In my opinion, the best students are sponges. You have to be open, you have to want to learn, and in this day and age, you have to be open to different cultures, different points of view, different kinds of music. And I think students are more so now.
How did you wind up studying in Bangladesh and India?
I have to go back a little bit further. When I was in junior high, me and Fred Flintstone, I wanted to play the flute. And the teacher said, flutes are for girls, here's some drumsticks. This was in 1974 or something. So I started to play drums, but I always wanted melody in my life. I always wanted melody. I had this yearning for melody. When I got to CalArts, another drum set guy came up and said, you should study this percussion instrument from India because it uses the same muscles in your hands that playing drum set does. And the drum was called pakhawaj. And it's a barrel-shaped drum used in northern India, similar to the mridangam used in the south. And I started to study that. There's a language in Sanskrit that is like a solfege system, where all of the sounds are different hand and finger positions on the drums. And to me, that was rhythmic melody. Now, at the same time at CalArts, I went to CalArts because I wanted to study with a bass player there named Charlie Hayden, who had been Ornette Coleman's bassist for years, and I loved his music, so I went there, began to play in his ensemble, and I became exposed to East Indian percussion. And that had a big influence on me because it was the first time I encountered percussion that had a complete classical solo repertoire. So I got very into that. I loved it. I continued when I went to Seattle. I did my master's at CalArts, decided to do my doctorate at Seattle. In between those times, I wrote some magazine articles for a magazine called Rhythm Magazine. And it was all about how to use world percussion on the drum set. The article was called Inside World Music. It ran for about 6 months. And that gave me the idea that I would do a dissertation on the application of the North Indian pakhawaj for the jazz drummer. So that's what I focused on. And when I got to Seattle, I combined the two. And I was playing classical music on that instrument with traditional singers and doing the jazz thing and other hand percussion, starting to mix all these things. And I had a favorite pakhawaj player named Mohan Sham Sharma. And he ended up coming to Seattle for a concert. And I took some lessons with him while he was there. And that was a bond that lasted well over 10 years. I ended up joining the Peace Corps to go to Bangladesh because there was no Peace Corps in India. So I spoke with some musicians from India. My two choices were Nepal and Bangladesh. And they said, go to Bangladesh because the border to Calcutta is much easier than the border between Nepal and India. So that's how I ended up in Bangladesh. I wanted to continue to study this instrument. My pakhawaj teacher, Mohan Sham, came to Bangladesh. I studied with him. I continued to play the instrument. And in the first year I was a Peace Corps volunteer, I was teaching English. And I met my wife, Sally, at that time. She was also teaching English and studying classical Indian music, vocal. We got married in Bangladesh. She's also American, from New Mexico. And we came back to the States, and I continued with pakhawaj. I used it for modern dance classes. My wife did her master's degree in Atlanta at Emory University. So I was playing pakhawaj for modern dance classes there and at Agnes Scott College. And I was playing with different people because I had knowledge of jazz too. So I was playing with guitarists and other things, doing some studio recordings, playing other percussion, and I continued with it. And then we moved to New Mexico. And I woke up one morning and I was done, I just said, it was like something tapped me on the shoulder and said, it's time to move on.
How did you come back to playing the flute, and what about it was so life-changing for you?
As I said earlier, I'd wanted to play the flute since I was a kid. When I started to play drums, I got good very quick. And it became kind of my identity, my ego. It was competitive when I was growing up, the jazz drummer thing and all of that kind of stuff. So as a boy, when I was 13, 14 years old, I would get an allowance of $5 a week, and I would hop on my bike and ride down to the record store, and I would buy different albums. And I didn't know anything about world music, but I would buy albums because the album covers really intrigued me. So the None Such recordings, which were some of the first field recordings put onto LP, None Such and Folkways Music, I found the first shakuhachi recording and that they had put out, and also a bansuri recording. The first side of the bansuri was solo bamboo flute. And of course, the whole shakuhachi recording was solo bamboo flute. So when my friends weren't around, my jazz and rock friends, we were listening to Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Cecil Taylor, Weather Report, Return to Forever. I would put on, when no one was around, I would put on these flute recordings. And I would just almost be in tears, because it just moved me so deeply. So finally, at some point after my doctorate, I knew that I had to make a change. What presented that to me, what presented itself to me was one evening, a man called and said his partner in Seattle was dying of AIDS. He was dying at home, and he had been a fan of mine. He would come to places where I was performing, and I did not know him. And I was at that time performing a lot of duets with a cellist named Laurie Goldston, who is the cellist on Nirvana's Unplugged. She's also a student of improvised music. She studied with Milford Graves and Bill Dixon at Bennington College. And so we were doing these free jazz duets all over Seattle, and I was playing hand drums and drum set. So this man apparently would come. He and his partner, and the partner called me and said, would you come play at his bedside? Could you bring a hand drum? I said, sure. So I went up there, and the man was, not really moving. And I played for him for a little while, about half an hour. And I went home, and the phone rang, and I put the drums down and grabbed the phone, and the man said, "I want you to know that he just transitioned. And I want you to know that," and he was crying, and he said, "I'm so happy that you're one of the last things that he got to hear." And I knew in that moment, music was different for me. I knew everything changed. I don't know why, but I said, I have to do something different with music. This isn't my calling to play in bars and to play in restaurants and to play in clubs. It's fine, I'm not knocking it, but I knew I had to do something different. So, with frame drums, I started to take lessons with Glenn Velez, and I started to talk with him a little bit. And just still as a percussionist, try to find ways to get into the healing modalities of music and learn about the history of the healing modalities in music, in the ancient pyramids, in ancient Greek culture, etc. So then, marrying Sally, she goes to do her doctorate in postdoc, in Stony Brook, New York. We moved there. Our daughter at that time was 3 years old. So I was a stay-at-home dad. And I said to her, Sally, one day, I said, "I'm going to try this flute thing. I don't know what I'm going to do." She said, "Great." I looked around on the internet. I didn't know anything about the Native American flute or the Native American style flute. And I started to see sites on YouTube, started to check things out. A man named Odell Borg was making mini flutes at a company called High Spirits Flutes. So I bought some from him, and I fell in love, and I went with it, and it touched that place in me. It was easy for me to learn. I didn't need a teacher. It has a background in improvisation. I didn't want my head to be buried in music anymore. And I just wanted something that I felt had a vibration that went beyond people clapping for me. It's a vibration that in my opinion, goes out further. And the flute taught me that human beings aren't the only thing that hear or listen, that we can go beyond the veil musically. We can touch other things, other people. And I started to learn about vibration, how vibration creates earthquakes, how it moves. And I started to think about that with my wife's ultrasound. I thought, wow, if sound can create images like that and produce things, it's so powerful.
It's marvelous that you reconnected with your love of the flute after having been discouraged in high school from pursuing it because you were the wrong gender. It's wonderful that you had a turning point after playing music to a man in hospice. It reminds me of the tradition of psychopomps in the Greek culture. Many cultural traditions have shamans, priests, or priestesses who help people cross over and connect to deities of the underworld or the afterlife. A psychopomp is a guide for the soul who takes people on the journey to the afterlife. The hummingbird was associated with the solar and war deity of sacrifice in the Aztec religion, Huitzilopochtli. And Aztec warriors wore hummingbird feather motifs on their helmets.
Death is something that has never frightened me. I've always seen it as a waking up or a moving on. I feel that we are confined in our shells to a certain extent, and that when someone close to us passes on, their energy can never be separated from us at that point. My father passed of cancer in 1994, and I was with him, my mother and I, when he passed. And it felt so freeing. I felt like he was finally free. He was in Las Vegas in a hospice care, and I was still in Seattle finishing my doctorate. So I flew there. And when I flew back on the little porch where I lived in student housing was a red-breasted bird, I guess a swallow. And it wouldn't leave the porch. It was running around on the ground in circles. And at first I thought it was injured. And I went out and I just knew it was my dad. I just knew it was him. And as soon as I knew it was him, it ran around in a couple more circles, looked at me, and took off. And whenever I see those birds, I feel like he's just saying, hey, how's it going?
So one of my clients wrote a book about ancient Irish cultures and traditions. Ben Gagnon, he did a lot of research. There's a traditional flute that mimicked swans, and
Yes.
that became a big part of the Irish musical sound. There's also a guy named Tom Brown
Okay.
who wrote a book on his theories on language coming from birds.
You know, there's another book that I read as an ethnomusicology student when I was doing my doctorate called, and I don't want to get the author wrong. I want to say it's Stephen Feld, but I'm not sure. It's called Bird Songs of the Kaluli. And the Kaluli are a people in Papua New Guinea, and they honor birds. And for certain ceremonies, they dress as birds, they dance as birds, they sing the bird songs. They use the bird songs for hunting and communication, and it is absolutely fascinating.
One thing that I think a lot of us through social media are getting exposed to is musicians playing to animals, which is so profound to see how it touches animals. I've been thinking about how we call animals wild and then we say, these animals are domesticated, but animals have been evolving with people forever. So even the wildest of animals, their ancestors related to us. They were on the outskirts of villages, they were hunted by humans. And I think oftentimes, especially vegans, but anyone who
Yes.
loves nature, thinks about our worthiness as humans because we've been destroying the planet, right? Our
Absolutely.
worthiness to be here, and the idea that the planet will go on without us, whether we're here or not, and that maybe the planet can undo some of the damage and reclaim itself. When I see these videos, I think about the relationship between humans and animals. And that's one thing that we can offer them. We can, of course, if they get hurt on something man-made or a fence or even something natural, we can rehabilitate them. And that relationship has continued. So that's in all of our DNA. The animals might not know it consciously. We might not know it consciously, but that relationship of stewardship has always been there since the dawn of time. Yeah, I mean, who else is keeping track but us anyway, right?
Absolutely.
I think that we don't realize the power of music as a tool to develop and cultivate our relationship with nature. We compartmentalize and we say, oh, these animistic religions, whether it's Africa or Native American traditions or other indigenous traditions, they honored and celebrated and they explained their world through lore that was connected to animals or animal deities. But people don't think about the actual lived experience that we can tap into now to understand where our ancestors were, because we can relate. And if we were immersed and our culture was agricultural and our community was all dependent on and in a symbiotic relationship with animals, we would really be able to see more clearly that spiritual connection, that mind-body connection, and that holistic relationship we can tap into now that we've always had, that our ancestors had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, they can survive without us. We can't survive without them. And it's interesting to look at the planet. And this doesn't make anything non-spiritual. To me, it's totally spiritual and touches a spiritual place that we are, or the planet, we're representations of each other. We mirror each other. For example, inside of our bodies, cells, bacteria, everything, there are battles going on constantly. There are battles going on. There are small peace treaties being given inside our bodies between different parts of our bodies. And as those grow, those outer expressions become who we are. We have to deal with conflict, with jealousy, with envy, with love, with hate. All of those things are part of the chaos that creates the beauty of nature. It's also part of the chaos that creates the beauty of the human being. You know, if we understand those things exist within us, then we can see them and not control them, but we can just know they're there, and we can actually use them, I believe, in positive ways. And we can do that as a culture with our planet as well. You know, once we begin to set up walls, either invisible walls, barriers, and judgment, it's very difficult to become unified with other people. Now, different people are on different frequencies. You know, not everyone is on the same frequency, and that's fine. But if we can just respect that and combine with people that are on our channel, on our frequency, it's not a competition. There's room for all of it because all of it's here. And if all of it's here, then it's supposed to be here, to me, you know. So I agree with you. Every step we take, either a very wise animal or a wise person has stepped there before. And if we're open to absorbing that energy, whether it's on a sidewalk or in the forest or in a subway station, if we can just think for a moment all the amazing footsteps that have been in the place that we put our feet, we can unify with that and have that as part of who we are. So for me, when I started to get into it, first it was the sound. I fell in love with the sound. And then I went into researching the history of it. So I became interested in the traditional native flute. This is a replica made by a man named John Norris. This is a replica of a flute from, I think this one was made in the early 1900s, but this style of flute is as far back as we can go, into the mid 1800s or maybe earlier than that. The instrument was originally made anatomically to the person. In Lakota tradition, which I learned from Kevin Locke, it was traditionally a courting instrument. So if a young man wanted to court a young lady, he would go to a group of elders. They would measure his arm's length, take a branch, and basically make the flute to that person, and they would teach him one or two songs that he would sing and play. He would go outside, the young lady's living space, play and sing. And if the father didn't come out and shoo him away, then he was doing fine. So that it was a courting instrument, just like we see those old videos in England of someone playing a lute, and singing to the young person on the balcony. Very, similar, that tradition or those stories. So those songs are put on the instrument. Then eventually, as people started to learn how to make flutes, they started to use the pentatonic minor scale. The 5-note scale it just goes back and back and back and back in history, to the point where in the ancient caves in Europe, they found flutes that are 30, 40,000 years old, bone flutes with 5 holes, 5 notes, 5 pitches. There's a man who was a native flute maker, and he also played the Japanese shakuhachi. At some point in Japan actually closed its borders, codified a lot of its culture, and they codified the shakuhachi to a 5-note pentatonic minor scale. So he took that and put it on a Native American flute and began to call it Native American style, which not only denotes the scale, but it also denotes the maker. Native American style is a term used for non-affiliated Native American flute makers. If you do not belong to a tribe, whether you are Native or not, it's Native American style. And it's actually federal law that applies to beadwork, pottery, everything. If there's something coming from a piece of pottery made by someone who is not an indigenous person, they have to call it Native American style pottery, for example. So he put the pentatonic minor scale on these flutes, and with that, allowed people to learn very easily because the notes all fit together. And it also allowed people to play with other musicians, play with their friends, play in groups, because the instruments were in tune with each other. So that's a scale that had always touched me. When I would ever sit down at the piano or a percussion instrument like the marimba, I would always play in the pentatonic minor. Pentatonic minor scale is part of our regular scale, but it's not do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Some of the notes are skipped. The black notes on the piano are grouped in 3 and 2. If you play just those, that's the pentatonic minor scale. That structure of steps starting from any note. So, so many people don't realize how prominent it is. Jimi Hendrix, for example, played a lot of pentatonic minor and pentatonic major. The blues has a ton of that. John Coltrane would play pentatonic scales over harmonies, and he had such a brilliant mind that he could take a note and just stack different groups of 5-note scales on top of it, and it gave his soloing a feeling of floating over everything else that was happening and then coming back to it. It goes back in history. So even though the traditional flutes from the 1800s, etc., were not pentatonic minor tuned, they were 5-note flutes tuned to the person's body. And that's the beauty of it. That's the connection. They were set up for the person. They touched the person. And it allowed this person to express the feeling of love, of caring, of sharing. And to me, that's the connection, is the sound with the human aspect, So, and for whatever reason, the pentatonic minor scale has grown throughout history, and it has become a standard. And it is just one system.
We've been speaking with musician Dr. Ed Pias. He teaches online courses at New Mexico Tech. You've been listening to Healing Wisdom. You can find this episode and others like it on WOMR.org, HealingWisdomRadioshow.com, and wherever you get your podcasts.